7.5. Not enough, but it's something more enough. Whole bunch of fat right there. It's fat.
Imagine losing the child, a child that you care about to slavery. Then imagine that same child's work going into products that are sold by corporations all over the world to people like us. Unfortunately, this is happening all the time. And the product that is being sold, that we're buying, is chocolate. Today I'd like to ask you all to consider three things. The first is what these child slave laborers go through every day in order to harvest the cocoa beans that make our chocolate. Also, to consider the corporations that are allowing this to go on, and the corporations who are doing something to try to keep it from happening. And finally, I want to ask you to learn how we can make a change so that we can get rid of child slavery for good. This is actually a clear matter of ethics, and we really should strive to help these families get back together and make these corporations be held accountable for the immoral acts that they are creating. You might be wondering where and how these children are coming into slave labor. The Ivory Coast of West Africa is the leading exporter of chocolate, or cocoa beans, which is what we use to make the chocolate. There are over 600,000 farms on the Ivory Coast right now, and from it's antislavery.org. If you go to that website, they have documented that there are over 100,000 children under slave labor in those farms throughout the Ivory Coast. And all of these children are between the ages of 10 and 16. So I'm sure you know somebody that is in that age group, and imagine them being put to work against their will. A lot of the families of these children are impoverished. They live in poverty, and they are bribed to give the children up so that they can take the children away and put them on the farms. And they promise the people paychecks and never send them. Other children are kidnapped and trafficked away, so their families never see them again. There are very extremely poor living conditions on these farms. There are children. The children have to climb high up in the cocoa trees in order to retrieve the pods that have the cocoa beans inside. They use machetes, huge knives to chop the cocoa beans pods down to retrieve the beans out. And then they use the machetes also to cut the pods open to retrieve the beans. Also, they use very strong, harsh pollutants, pesticides, which are pollutants to humans that can make the children ill. So they're suffering not only from having to work hard, but illness and injuries because of this harvesting. Now that you know a little bit about how the cocoa beans are harvested by these slaves, it's important that you know the companies that are endorsing the slavery. Just to name a few, these are names that you see in the grocery store every single day. Hershey's, M&M's, Mars, Nestle, Kraft, Toblerone, and Lindt, which is a gourmet chocolate brand. They also make Ghirardelli chocolate. All of those chocolates are actually produced with cocoa beans that come from the Ivory Coast that are harvested by slave children. They passed a bill a few years ago called the Harkin-Engel Protocol, and this bill was supposed to make the corporations do something about this slavery, because the corporations knew that this was happening. So they made them sign this bill and promise within 5 years to get rid of these slave plantations so that they could get their cocoa beans from someone else. But they haven't actually done anything, even though they signed the bill. They haven't made any changes from what we can tell so far. You can actually get a list of all of the slave-run companies, because just the ones I named are just a few of them. The whole list is found on fairchocolate.org. If you go visit the website, they'll give you a full list of everyone that's using slave-run chocolate. There are actually also many companies that provide very fine quality chocolate from companies or farms, I'm sorry, that do not have slaves at all. They pay their workers and they are legally of age to be working. Some of the names of these companies are Belgium's Best, Ben & Jerry's, we know them, Starbucks, Cliff Bar, I see them at Walmart all the time, Newman's Own Organic, and Roman Mill. You can also go to fairchocolate.org to find the full list of the good chocolate suppliers too. So it's a really useful site. Since I think it's at this point it's our responsibility because we are consumers and we buy these products and our money fuels these corporations. It's sort of our responsibility to take charge of where we're getting our products and to know where they're coming from. And one of the easiest ways we can do that is by supporting the fair trade companies that choose to buy cocoa beans from people that don't have slaves. Instead of buying from these cheaper corporations, they supply these bars you can get at the checkout that are cheap, but is it really worth the human sacrifice that's really going into that chocolate? I think it would be worth it to spend a little bit more money on a finer chocolate. So we'll just stop buying the cheap chocolate. That's why it's cheap, because they have free labor, so they're getting it wholesale from a farmer that's not paying any people. That's why it's so cheap. We can also protest against those manufacturers that use the slavery to demand change. Fairchocolate.org, like I mentioned earlier, fairchocolate.org has addresses to all those major manufacturers where you can actually sit down and write to them and tell them that you are aware of the slavery and that you'd like to see some change because you will stop buying their chocolate. And maybe if enough of us do that, maybe we can cause them to make some kind of a change. There's also a national petition. You can go online to www.thebells.umnb.edu, and there they have a petition. It's a national petition. You can sign it, and if they get enough signatures, maybe more laws can be passed to discourage the use of slavery in any kind of production coming into the United States. So in conclusion, we have a real responsibility to make a change as to what products are coming into our homes and how they're getting there. I know that our children mean the most to us, and I'm sure those families are devastated to know that their children are working in these terrible farms and under these terrible conditions. So we've confronted today the link between child slavery and chocolate. We've also gained some knowledge on the companies that provide chocolate through child slavery, and also the companies that do not support slavery. And we've also learned some ways that we can make a change individually. So next time you go and pick up a chocolate bar, you might just want to think, where did this chocolate come from? I think we can all work together to bring back chocolate back into the light so all these children can have a brighter future and spend more time with their families.
Woo! Did a great job.